Hello and welcome to a very special Dennis the Menace Puffin Virtually Live. Thank you all for joining us. I am Steven Butler, author of the brand new The Diary of Dennis the Menace series, which gives readers a sneak peek into the life of the Beano's biggest prankster. Today, I'm talking to you live from the Sadler's Wells Theatre here in London, and I'm joined by the pupils of Hugh Middleton Primary School. There they are. Yes, yes, yes. Very good. And everyone here has come dressed as Dennis's partner in crime, Gnasher. And of course, I'm also joined by you, our online viewers from across the globe. Now, in addition to our UK audience, we've got viewers tuning in from Argentina, Canada and Australia. So a very big warm welcome to all of you watching out there. Now, I will be answering all of your questions throughout the show. So all of you online viewers, remember to submit your questions via the Puffin Virtually Live website, and I will aim to answer as many of them as possible in the time that we have. So, the Beano. It is the quintessential British children's comic, first published by D.C. Thompson 75 years ago. Can you believe it? And it's still read weekly by thousands of children and grown-ups. The Beano is best known for its famed characters, such as the Bash Street Kids, Roger the Dodger, Billy the Whiz, and Minnie the Minx, as well as, of course, the world's wildest boy, Dennis the Menace, and his accomplice, Gnasher, an Abyssinian wire-haired tripe hound. Now, the world's wildest boy was how Dennis was introduced in the Beano when he first made his first appearance back in 1951, which would make Dennis 63 years old. Well, I think you'll agree that he certainly lived up to this description. He's the leader of the Brat Pack, impulsive, mischievous, strong-willed and tenacious, and determined to get the most out of life with all action, non-stop, full-on excitement. So, you must be asking yourself, why on earth would Dennis choose to write a diary? It doesn't seem like something our favourite menace would do. We'll take a look at this clip to find out more.
This is terrible. I can't keep a diary for a whole school year. I'll turn all booky, like Creature. Or even worse, I'll turn into Walter. How can I waste my time worrying about writing down what I've had for breakfast and how many fleas I've found on Gnasher when there's important menacing to be done? It's not fair. I can't keep a diary. I know. I'll train my dog Gnasher to eat my diary. Yes, it's foolproof. My chumptastic best friend will eat anything. I know I can get him to eat his way through this rotten notebook. In fact, I'll train him to eat every notebook he ever sees. That way, all the notebooks in Beano Town will vanish in no time. Mrs. Creature can never blame me for not doing my homework ever again. That'll show her. 6:30 a.m. Up bright and early, thanks to my mega bleep digiclock, and out into the garden to train Gnasher to eat diaries. This is going to be super easy. Come on, boy. Come on. Here, Gnasher. OK, fetch. Gnasher. Gnasher. Come on, Gnasher. Oh, this is just too boring. I have a gazillion menacing plots and plans and not a single. Wait a minute. I've got it! It's genius! If old Creature wants a diary, she'll get one. My kind of diary. A Dennis diary. A menacing diary by Dennis!
Well, you didn't think that Dennis would write a normal diary, did you? Of course not. It's a menacing diary, and I'll be sharing a sneak peek of the mischief that lies within the pages a little bit later on. Now, I've been a huge fan of the Beano since I was a boy, and like Dennis, I absolutely love playing tricks. So I thought I would tell you about the first time I fell in love with menacing and began following in Dennis's footsteps. Put your hands up, all of you here, if you have a sister. Lots and lots of you, and you out there as well. Well, keep your hands up if you have a big sister. Well, if you have a big sister, you know that older sisters are the most evil thing in the world. Agreed? Yes! Well, I have an older sister called Jenny, and when we were young, we used to play tricks on each other all the time. And actually, we still do now. But I'm going to tell you a story about what happens when tricks go wrong. And it starts with the dreaded H word, homework. Now, let's face it, no one really likes homework, do they? No, and I hated homework. I thought homework was the worst thing in the world. And the reason that I hated homework so much was because I was terrible at reading or writing. When I was a little boy, I was awful at it. And I really hated homework. But one day, for once, I had good homework. I had to draw a picture. And I was quite good at drawing. I liked drawing. Wasn't very good at reading or writing, but I liked drawing. So that day, I ran home and I got out my pad and my pens. And I drew, if I remember correctly, I drew a house. And I drew a little stick figure of me standing in the front garden holding a balloon like this. And I drew a sun with a smiley face, and I thought it was the best picture in the world. And I wanted everyone to know that I was the artist of the best picture in the world. So I wanted to write my name on it. But I found my name really, really tricky, because my name, as you know, is Steven, and I have 2 E's in my first name, and I hated E's. I always used to get them back to front and upside down and round the wrong way. So I went to my big sister Jenny and asked her to write by Steven Butler on a piece of paper so that I could copy it onto my artwork. And she wrote it down, and I did. And I copied it in big red letters across the top of my artwork like a big red rainbow. And then I wanted to show my mum, because as I said, it was the best picture in the world. And I had a trick that I used to like to play on my mum, and I'm going to share it with all of you here today and all of you out there. And it's a very good trick, and I highly recommend you all try it. And it's this. When I was little, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in a very big house, and I would get as far away from my mum as I could get. And I'd go to the top of the stairs, and I'd go to the end of the furthest corridor, and I'd find the furthest room away from my mum. And when I was as far away from my mum as I could get, I would go to the furthest corner of that room, and then I would stand there. And when I was as far away as I could get from my little mother, I would stand there and I'd go, "Mum!" And my poor mum would drop what she was doing and start running around the house going, "Ah! Ah!" And I'd be there at the top of the house going, "Mum, come quick!" And my poor mum would be huffing and puffing around the house, wobbling away up and down the stairs. And when she finally ran into the room, she'd run in and go, "What's wrong?" And I'd stand there and shrug and go, "Nothing," and walk away. And I highly recommend you all try it. It works very well. But on this occasion, like I said, I wanted to show my mum my picture. So as always, I went to the top of the house and I held out my picture and I went, "Mum!" And my mum dropped what she was doing. She always fell for it and started running around the house going, "Ah!" And as always, huffing and puffing around, and she ran up the stairs and I held out my picture. And then something very strange happened, because I thought my mum would take one look at my picture and would throw chocolate and money at me for being the best son in the world. But instead, she went very quiet. And then she stared at my picture and she peeked over the top of her glasses. And then she said something I wasn't expecting. She said, "Steven, that's awful." I thought, "What are you talking about? It's the best picture in the world." But it turns out that my mum wasn't talking about my picture. My mum was talking about what was written across the top of it in very big red letters. Because when I went to my big sister Jenny and asked her to write by Steven Butler on a piece of paper, she didn't write by Steven Butler on a piece of paper. She wrote, "Steven Butler is a big fat stupid pig." And I copied it in big red letters across the top top of my artwork. And I was furious. And I was that kind of furious that you can only be when you are a little boy. I was furious. And I decided that I was going to get my revenge. I was going to get my revenge on Jenny. So I went and got all of my sister's favourite toys, and my sister loved My Little Pony. Put your hands up if you've got a My Little Pony. Yes, I thought there might be lots of you. Well, my sister had loads, and My Little Pony were a mystery to me. I didn't understand it at all, because to me, I thought My Little Pony was rubbish, because it didn't do anything. It just had hair. But my sister loved anything with hair. You could stick hair to a stick, and she would have loved it, or stick hair to an old rock, and she would have loved it. But I didn't understand, and all she did was stand around the house brushing her My Little Ponies. And that's all she ever did. She'd always surprise you behind doors, and you'd open the door and go, "Ah!" and she'd be there. So I got all of my sister's My Little Ponies, and I did something very, 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 very naughty, which you must never do. I had a good think, and the only sensible thing I could think of to do to get my revenge on Jenny was I got all of the My Little Ponies, and I flushed them down the loo. Yes, I did. I flushed them down the toilet and I blocked the loo, and all the water came pouring out and all their little pony corpses were floating in there, and I got into so much trouble. It was very, very bad, but what do you think of that? Does that sound like something that Dennis would do? Well, it's stories, indeed, it's stories like my menacing antics that inspire me when I'm helping Dennis write his diary. But I also had some help from the extremely talented illustrator Steve May, who drew the menacing illustrations for the diary. And now you're very, very lucky. Here's Steve to tell you how he draws Dennis and Gnasher.
Hello, my name's Steve May, and I'm the illustrator for Diary of Dennis and Menace, and this is my lair where I create my drawings. The books are written by Steven Butler, and what happens is when Steven has written the books, nice people at Puffin send them over to me, and they give me suggestions of what I'm going to draw. And sometimes I draw that, sometimes I ignore it and just make something else up. And usually they're very nice and let me get away with that. Probably my favourite thing to draw in the Dennis and Menace books is probably Gnasher, just because he's so messy and it's great and scribbly. And I like scribbling, it's my job. If I've got advice for you for drawing Dennis, I mean, it's great fun because the hair is great fun to draw. But he's actually, I just use a different set of circles really, because his head's just a big circle. And then his nose, and he has the two eyes like this. Then he has his big, evil grin that just sits up underneath his eyes. And then you've got the eyebrows, because he's always mischievous. So we have this eyebrow thing going on. I obviously read the story first, and then I choose the most exciting picture to do first, usually. And I just draw a rough outline of what's going to be in the picture. So sometimes if there's lots of characters, sometimes in this new book, we've got Bash Street Kids, we've got Dennis's Gran, we've got Gnasher, and then I usually just go through the book like that really, so I take it in turns, and I usually pick my favourite drawings first and then leave the difficult ones right to the end.
Steve, that was brilliant, and drawing Menace style. Breaking the drawing down into stages makes it seem a lot easier. Now viewers, why don't you have a go at drawing Dennis, Gnasher or any of the other Beano Town characters yourself? Right now it's time for me to answer a couple of questions from our audience, and we're going to start with the question from you out there in the big wide world. So first of all, I have a question from Denise at St. Peter's School in Barcelona, and she asks, Dennis wasn't a very good student, so how did he manage to write a diary? Lots of spelling mistakes and crossings out, I suppose. Will we understand it? Well, that's where I come in. So of course you'll understand it, because I helped Dennis. So whilst Dennis was doing all his naughty adventures, he was telling me all about them and I was writing them down for him. So hopefully you'll be able to understand what he's up to when you have a read of the book. But now we're going to go to a lovely audience member here in Sadler's Wells. So I'm going over to Adele. And who are you with, Adele?
I've got Medina here, who's
Hello,
age
Medina.
7.
Who inspired you to be an author?
Very good question. Very, very good question. Well, actually, there are 2 people that inspired me to be an author. And the first one is the brilliant, very, very funny Jeremy Strong, who is a wonderful children's author, because I was very, very lucky that when I was a little boy at primary school, Jeremy Strong was my headmaster, and not many people can boast that, so I consider myself to be very, very lucky. And then secondly is the brilliant Roald Dahl, because I loved his books, and it was actually one of his books that was the first ever book that I ever read. And I read a book called Matilda, and it was the first book I ever finished, and I love him, and I've loved him ever since. But yes, lastly, we're going to go back to you guys out there in the big wide world, and we are going to have a question from Aisha from Fairlop Primary School in England. And Aisha asks, who is naughtier, Dennis or Gnasher? So very good question, Aisha. But to be honest with you, I don't think one is naughtier than the other. I think together they are a great big ball of menacing, and I think they both make each other even more naughty than one of them on their own. So I think they're just as naughty as each other. But yes, thank you for all of your questions, and they were very, very good, and keep them coming in as I'll be answering some more shortly. Right, so you have seen how to draw Dennis, and now I think it's time for us to think about how you might go about writing your own diary. Well, for me, when I write the diaries, the most important thing to keep in mind are, number 1, this is the first fact I think you should keep in mind. It's great to remember what you have done, but try to write it down, and try to write down how you feel at the time. Were you, let's say, were you scared? Or were you happy? Were you nervous or excited? And then number 2, try to write every single day, or at least 3 or 4 times a week. Otherwise, you might forget something important. And number 3, diaries don't have to include just words. You can doodle and draw and stick in pictures or mementos of what you have done and anything that helps keep the memory fresh in your mind. But now, I think it's about time for me to share some practical tips about how you can learn to become masters of mayhem like Dennis and Gnasher. So first things first, all aspiring menaces need to get their grabbers on some key supplies to help cause some chaos. So we're going to my box of menacing here. And the first thing that you will need are banana skins. These are perfect for setting a slippery trap. Next, we need some rotten tomatoes, because these are perfect catapult ammo. Then, of course, to have the perfect catapult, you need knicker elastic. Get your grandma's biggest pair of pants, but make sure that they are washed first. Cool. There we are. Then we have fake spiders with jiggly legs. Hide this in a clever location, and this will make all fraidy cats jump a mile. Too many spiders. And now, the all-important rules of menacing from Dennis, and with a little help from some of his friends who may look familiar to our audience here.
Rule 1. Always be ready to menace. Grab the opportunity and don't look back.
Rule 2. Never menace while carrying scissors.
Rule 3. In the case of an emergency, laugh really hard then run like the wind.
Rule 4. Steer clear of grown-ups. They're tricky.
Rule 5. Say no to schoolwork. Paper is not for books and writing. It is for squidging up into little balls with your spit and throwing at the back of your teacher's head with your pea shooter.
Rule 6. Don't forget your pea shooter.
Rule 7. Never, never, never leave home without your catapult.
Rule 8. Get
a dog. All menaces must have one. Abyssinian wire-hired trip hounds like Gnasher are the best.
Rule 9. Don't trust anyone more than your dog. A good menace's dog is worth its weight in sweets and crisp and pocket money.
Remember, the Dennis way is the only way.
Now, rules 8 and 9 are particularly important. Dennis and his chomptastic pal Gnasher are inseparable in their quest for chaos and their unshakable belief that thinking twice is a waste of brain power. Dennis and Gnasher are brothers in arms, menaces forever, and whilst Gnasher's loyalty to Dennis leads him into scrape after scrape, he knows that life will never be dull when Dennis is around, and that is how he likes it. Well, I thought I'd have a go at training my own dog, Harry, to become my menacing accomplice. Let's take a look at how I got on. Hello, I'm very excited to be training my new menacing pal, Harry, here, who I'm sure will be invaluable in menacing the nation and will be as menace-tastic as Gnasher in no time at all. So let me introduce you properly. Here we are, Harry. Right, So this is Harry. Another important part of being a menace is knowing where to hide when your menace has gone wrong and the grown-ups are on the warpath. I think Harry has two options. The first is a little bit dramatic, but definitely effective. Playing dead. Grown-ups can't tell you off when you're dead. The second option is just to find a good blanket, roll up and hide until all the havoc has died down. Next, I'm going to train Harry to alert us when any troublesome, tricky grown-ups are trying to spoil our fun. Sit. Mika. Harry. Mika. Woof. Woof. Another important part of being a good menace's dog is being able to help with escape plans. So I'm pretty sure that Harry is well on his way to becoming a pretty brilliant, menacing pal. Oh, it's official. Harry's untrainable. Gnasher must be one of a kind. I give up. Well, perhaps Harry was the perfect menacing sidekick all along. Now, I think we have time for a few more questions from you guys out there. So let's start on our trusty iPad. Here we go. Let's have one. This is from Dervla Howley from Northern Ireland. Here we are. And she says, what was the last book you wrote? Well, it just so happens that the last book I wrote was one of Dennis's diaries. I have just completed book number 3, so we're way ahead. That comes out in August. But before that, book number 2 comes out in May, so you have to keep your eyes out for that one. And now we're coming to our live studio audience, and we're going back to Adele up in the audience. And who have we got here, Adele?
We've got Lila this time, who's aged 8.
Hello, Lila.
Who is your favourite character from Dennis the Menace?
Good question. My favourite character from Dennis the Menace is actually Dennis's little sister, Bee, because she's very, very naughty. She is equally as menacing as Dennis is. And there's a little play on words. Because her name is Bee, she has, rather than having the red and black stripes like everybody else, she has little yellow and black stripes like a little bumblebee. And I particularly like her because Bee is famous for doing massive, big, stinky blow-offs. And now, last question for this time from our audience out there. And we have one from Anne Tudor at Godolphin Junior School. And she says, when you were younger, were you ever worried that someone would read your diary and see all the private things you had written? Well, it just so happens that, as I told you before, I was terrible at reading or writing, so I never kept a diary. So no one ever found out my top secrets. But Thank you all for your questions. It's very good to hear from you, all you the Menace fans out there. But right now, I think it's about time that you had a sneak peek into the book. So I'm going to read to you in my best northern accent. Here we go. I'm going to read to you from a part of the diary where Dennis gives you a little guided tour around Beano town. And it goes like this. Here we are. Aha! I know. If you're going to be masters of menacing like me and Gnasher, you've got to know all the hiding places, escape routes, lookouts, dead ends, pitfalls, hideouts and vantage points in your neighbourhood. Take Beano town, for instance. If your town is anything like mine, it'll be full of brilliant places to help you menace. I'll show you around. Number 1, the tree house. Every good menace has to have a base, and the best menace bases are tree houses. It's amazing what funny things you can see from the top of a tree, and if Walter is sniffing about, you just have to pull up the ladder and he can't get anywhere near you, keeping you and your top secret plans safe from Snoopy Piggy eyes. Number 2, Beano Town Park. Parks are great stomping grounds for menaces. Beano Town Park is full of trees for climbing and hiding in and has the boating pond and the playground. The climbing frame in the playground is a fantastic lookout for keeping an eye on Walter and his cronies. And if you need to top up your menaceometer, you can push them in the pond. Walter is terrified of pondweed and screams like a whingy baby every time. And last, Bass Street School. Now, wait a minute. I know what you're thinking. School? Has Dennis gone loopy? No, Dennis hasn't gone loopy. Think of all the great menacing supplies that are there for the taking. Paint, ink, modelling clay, paper, chalk, drawing pins. Never underestimate the importance of a quick secret trip to the school stock cupboard. Remember, menaces mean business. Stock up now. Right, so now you've heard a little of Dennis in action, and I think it's only fair that I test your menacing skills. Make sure you have your pencil and paper ready to jot down whether your answer to each of these 4 questions is A or B. I hope you enjoyed the quiz. Did you have time to jot down your answers? If you had mostly A's, you are most like Dennis's arch enemy, Walter. But if you had mostly B's, congratulations. This means that you are a true menace, and Dennis would be proud to be your friend. Now, to finish up, let's have some more questions from our audience. And once again, we're going to start with you guys out there in the big wide world. Now, this question comes from Wilson Stewart School, a special academy. And their teacher says that their questions were sent from their special needs students, and some of them posted these using voice-operated communication aids. And the question that they've sent in is, have you ever tried to be good all day? Well, I have to say, I don't think I ever have. I've got a little bit of menace inside me, and as much as I've been good, I don't think I've ever tried to be good all day. I think that's a little bit too boring, so I always get up to a little bit of mischief, I think. And now, we're going back to our studio audience here at Sadler's Wells, and we're going back to Adele in the audience. And who have you got here, Adele?
We've got Archie, who's aged 9.
Hello, Archie.
Why do you like Dennis the Menace?
Why do I like Dennis the Menace? Good question. Well, I like Dennis the Menace for the same reason that everyone else likes Dennis the Menace. He's brilliant. And I'm a bit of a menace, and I like menaces. I like someone that will stand up for themselves and someone that isn't afraid to get into a little bit of trouble now and again. So yes, I'm a big fan of Dennis for the same reason that all those other Beano Town readers around the world, Beano readers around the world are. So yes, and then our last question that we're going to go to just here, and we're going to have, if Dennis had a cat for a pet, what would he have called it? And that's from Graham from Atherstone Library. If Dennis had a cat for a pet. Well, unfortunately, I don't think Dennis would even have the chance to have a cat for a pet because Gnasher would chase it away. So I'm sad to say that I don't think Dennis would ever be able to have a cat for a pet. So he'd probably call it something like goodbye. Yes, I think that's it. But thank you all for your questions, and we're coming to the end. So I hope very, very much that you've enjoyed the past 30 minutes and getting a sneak peek into the life of the one, the only Dennis the Menace. Now, the Diary of Dennis the Menace is out now, and the second instalment, as I told you before, Beano Town Battle, is coming out in May. So, grown-ups everywhere, remember, when you see stripes, it is too late to run. And everyone else, happy menacing, and never forget, the Dennis way is the only way! Roar!